So yeah, we have Quiet Place Part Dos. Also, hello. Yeah, I'm not dead. I'm still doing movie reviews in case you don't watch any of the gameplay stuff. I know it's been a minute since the last one. I gotta work through these depressive episodes somehow, and by doing that, it's by watching movies and feeling ready to talk about them. A Quiet Place Part 2 is very similar to A Quiet Place Part 1 from a review standpoint, in that nothing I say can really add anything new to the table. The critic consensus is pretty much unanimous. The audience consensus, from what I see online, is pretty much unanimous, with some holdouts here and there, but you're always going to get holdouts when it comes to popular film. The general synopsis is fantastic movie. They did it again. Where sequel concerns normally rear their ugly head, Quiet Place Part 2 instead does what a good sequel should, but I'll get into that in a moment. We'll go from the ground up like I always do. Quiet Place Part 2, look, technically, it's a 2021 release because of COVID, but the movie's been ready to go for over a year, so if you go online, it says 2020 release, not 2021. But the movie came out in 2021, so I'm just going to view it as a release for this year. As with the case of the first Quiet Place, it is directed by John Krasinski, and yeah, he's really good at what he does. It's sometimes actors will want to be a director, and they might get overzealous, they might kind of make things kind of simple, they might go off the rails a little bit, but Krasinski showed with Quiet Place Part 1 that he is, I don't want to use a stereotypical term like master of the craft, but he's very humble in his origins, and he is very familiar with how to make good direction and art with film. It worked really well in Quiet Place Part 1 with kind of that, I don't even want to say claustrophobic horror, but the formula for the first one was like suspension, horror, all kind of... He described it himself as like it's a family drama, but it's like kind of hidden under that layer of like monster movie and thriller and survival horror. Because really, it's not about the monsters. We're not going out there just like blowing the heads off of aliens here. It's about a family trying to learn how to adapt and survive in a new world. And once the events of the first film, take place and happen, now we have the second film. So Krasinski does a really good job. I have no complaints, even when things get heated or more actiony. Everything is clear on screen. Cinematography is good, both during day shots, evening shots, night shots especially. Like, everything is visible, it all is clear. I was never questioning what was going on screen. Props there. Honestly, a lot of the cast are big names, so I don't have to like look to my notes except for the kids. I always forget the kids' names, but John Krasinski, only in this movie in a flashback, and I'll get to that in a minute. Emily Blunt, again, we all know already. Emily Blunt's a fantastic actor. Full range of emotions here, but mainly just that of like a mother, just sad, grief-stricken, desperately trying to protect her family and her kids, and especially this newborn little toddler, this little baby. So, no complaints there. The addition that I did love, that kind of, I don't want to use the term surrogate father here, although he kind of is, but Cillian Murphy, another man that I love. If you haven't watched Peaky Blinders, go watch it. You want to see him as an OG way back in the day? Watch 28 Days Later. You want to see him in a lesser-known role that he still kills it in? Go watch Free Fire. Any of those will do. And this one, again, shines as like pretending to be an American, which people that aren't from America are better at playing us than we are anything else. It's crazy. But he does a great job. He's a fantastic addition, and he nails the character of who he's supposed to be portraying. And almost in a kind of like a Joel from Last of Us way, a little bit. I mean, didn't originate with Joel, but it's that, gruff survivalist who kind of turns over that leaf and tries to gain back some of their humanity, that kind of thing. Like, you've seen it before. It's a trope in film, television, media in general, but it's a trope that we're not exhausted by, basically. The kids, I always forget their name. We have Noah Jupe, does a great job. There's some pretty painful scenes involving him that props to this kid. I don't know how old he is, but man, does he kill it. Someone who really kind of like, who got a good starring seat in the first one, but really comes into her own as the character that she played in the first one, but even more so in the second one, is Millicent Simmons, the gal who actually is deaf in real life. Again, fantastic actor. And I can't wait to see, hopefully, what other film roles she gets in the future, because she knocks it out of the fucking park in part 2, even more so, in my opinion, than she did in part 1. Yeah, there isn't much to say about the film that hasn't already been said. I'll get any cons I have out of the way. I really wish that they didn't show so much of the flashback sequence in the trailers. It was very similar to an Invisible Man remake situation. Invisible Man remake, they teased the hospital scene, the hallway hospital scene. If you haven't seen the movie, watch it. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I feel like if the trailers hadn't shown that scene, then when that scene came up in the movie, it would have popped off even harder. And that's what I want, is that reaction. Like, you didn't watch a trailer for Rogue One and see the Darth Vader hallway scene teased it all. No, you didn't. Instead, they just throw it on you at the end, and you're like, oh my, what? And like, religious experience right there. Same could have happened in Invisible Man, and same could have really happened with the cold opening for Quiet Place Part 2. I feel like if they didn't show it at all, that's one thing, which I guess I see why they showed it, but I wish they only showed a little bit of it to kind of hint that we were going to get like one flashback and not shown so much of the carnage and the action. And that's honestly just me nitpicking. Like, it was still a great scene and a great way to open up the film, because it still does what this movie does great, which every sequel, you know, whether it be a game, another season of a television show, or a movie, needs to do correctly to be successful. A good sequel needs to take the base story and expand upon that story, the universe, the characters. You can't just have, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know. It might work for 22 Jump Street, I guess, but most times people want to see more. So what does it Quiet Place Part 2 do? Instead of taking place all the farm and the town, and that's it, like, you know, most of the farm, now it's like a whole new world. Like, many locations, or at least multiple new locations, expand more characters. We expand upon the world. We delve into, like, maybe a little bit they touch on a little bit of how this all might have started, or when it might have started, kind of what happened once it started, what are we doing now, how are we going to try to move forward as characters in our family, and as survivors, as humans trying to survive with this baby and this family. Like, it keeps expanding upon everything. Even the action. Like, if you're a fan of more action-oriented survival horror family drama films, you're probably going to enjoy this one more than one, because it does up the action considerably. I think they got a little bit more funding after the success of part 1. But yeah, it hits all the right notes for what you want a sequel to do, to be able to successfully work, in my opinion, as a sequel. So it's great. Is it as good as part 1? I'm still tussling with that answer. The contrarian in me wants to say no, because 1 was, for what it was, for that concept. You know, we'd heard the concept before. We've all watched or seen the trailer for Don't Breathe, another great movie, which got a pan by some people. But I'm torn. I think I liked part 1 more, but just barely, and just because of the premise of what it was, how contained it felt as a movie, and yet still, when I watched it in theaters, how effective it was. Like watching It Follows, like that, the feeling in my gut that shit's about to go down, and the tension and suspense, and the heartbreak and all this. It all hit pretty hard in 1, and while there were some moments that were similar to it in part 2, it did not hit for me as hard as part 1. Not to say part 2 is a bad movie. No, it's just I think I liked part 1 just like a teensy bit more, but part 2 is still great. I mean, that's about it. I mean, killer performances, like I said. I don't think anybody really struggled. I think everything was just a little, like, there was definitely more funding put into this one, like bigger budget, bigger set pieces, more dialogue, more character development and all that. There was more character development than the first one, but one thing I did miss from the first one is that you got a lot of your narrative and story contextually from, like, the environments, what the characters were doing, not so much what they were saying. Because when you have a movie where nobody can talk, you're kind of limited on how you can tell the story, right? So part 2, a lot more talking, but I mean, you know, it works. I will say, before I get to my final complaint, I did like how there were a couple moments in the movie, especially one involving the dock, which I'm not going to say anything, but it's a boat dock. But yeah, there's a great scene where I'm like, why doesn't this character just do this? And not only does he do exactly what I thought he would do in my head, like he should have done, but then he goes above and beyond a step further, and I'm like, oh, damn, okay, cool. So we are being logical in this film. That is the good news, is that characters in this film, for the most part, act fairly logically. There are some characters that are emotionally driven, and it kind of services the plot and the suspense that builds up, which leads to my only other complaint is that there's a couple moments of like Deus Ex Machina where it's like, you know, a tiny bit contrived. Are we talking levels like Fast and Furious, flying magnetic cars? No, but some moments where you're like, that's some awfully convenient timing, isn't it? And like, you barely notice it. Like, it's kind of those classic, like, again, tropes that you see in some films, but again, it services the plot, and it's not enough to detract from the overall experience. I'm just nitpicking again. That might have been a little bit longer than I thought it would be. I guess I had more to say than I thought, but yeah, Quiet Place Part 2. Definitely worth it in theaters. Funny enough, now that the mandates for masks are gone and the theaters are opening back up and all that, at least where I am right now. Well, they said it shattered COVID box office records, meaning that throughout Tenet's entire COVID theatrical release, Quiet Place Part 2 in one weekend blew it out of the water, which is kind of a damn shame, because Tenet is a really, really good movie that had a lot of effort put into it, and Christopher Nolan is like a great director, but I get it. Quiet Place Part 2 is more accessible to an audience. It's more sympathetic as a film, and the cast is more well-known to people. So I get it. But it's doing well. I would 100% say go see Quiet Place Part 2 in theaters. It's worth it. I would definitely say check it out. It's 100% worth the watch. While I might have liked Part 1 a little bit more, I will say Quiet Place Part 2 is a fantastic example of how to do a good sequel. And yes, they leave it open. I'm sure internet's already said it. No spoilers, but it's very much left open for a third. I think Paramount's going to go for the old triple hitter here. I think it's going to be the Quiet Place trilogy. I don't think they'll take it much further than a part 3. I think John Krasinski has more respect for the craft and himself than to try to milk this, so I think they're going to end it at part 3 whenever that comes out in the next, 2 or 3 years. So, yeah. I would say overall, my rating for Quiet Place Part 2 is a very solid, if not high, 4 out of 5. I would say it's another example of a near-perfect film that has just enough, minor flaws and some contrived moments, and it just, while I enjoyed it, it didn't, when you go see a movie and it just hits hard a certain way. It's like the first time that I saw Blade Runner 2049. Currently, for the time being, that's my favorite movie, and the first time I saw it in theaters, it hit all that I was looking for, and every time that I watch that movie, it gets better and better with each subsequent viewing. Now, will Quiet Place Part 2 do that? I don't know. Could be. But in any case, I would just say it's a strong 4 out of 5, near perfect film. If you're not a fan of thriller, survival horror, family drama type of deal, it's not really gory. There's moments that are bloody and kind of right on the edge of gore. I'm pretty sure it's rated R, if I'm not mistaken. But it's violent for sure. People get tossed around like rag dolls, but nobody's getting throats sliced open or John Wick to death or whatever. It's okay for, your young adults or the family or whatnot. Maybe not the small kids. It's kind of scary, but yeah. Okay, I hope I didn't talk too long. That's all I have to say. As always, I'm going to try to do more movie reviews. I got to get out there, see the movies, since they're actually starting to to show movies again. I just got to get off my ass and record these things. But for everybody who watches, thank you for the support. I appreciate it. I meant to do a top 10 for last year, but that kind of fell apart with COVID and, again, depressive episodes and whatnot, so I didn't really quite get around to a top anything list last year. I had ideas, but they all went down the shitter. So we'll see what this year brings. I don't think we're too far into it where we're going to lose on all the new releases, so I'll definitely try to work harder in the movie review department since people still seem to give a shit about what I have to say. So, thank you so much, guys and gals, for watching. That was my review of Quiet Place Part 2. Like I said, I loved it. Really good movie. Go check it out if you're into that kind of thing. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next movie review that I do. And goodbye, travelers.